Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to another video on the channel. So what I've got for you today is a 98% rated wildcard team for Game Week 2. And I know it's probably too early to be wildcarding this stage in the season, but if you're watching this video, you're at least considering it. And even if you're not wildcarding, hopefully it helps you out with your transfer thoughts moving forward in general. If it does and you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. We're closing in on 500 subscribers, which for a small channel would be a really cool milestone to get. So if you can help me, I would really appreciate it. One thing to note is that I am recording this video before Sunday's games have kicked off, but if there are any injuries, I will just pop some alternative players in the comments, but I do discuss this as well throughout. So before we get started, why not join the mini league? League code is on the screen right now. If you feel like you can, take me on and my team and think, you can beat me, which might not be that difficult, it'd be great to have you on board. Let's take a look at the team and we're going to start in goal. And for this team, for this wild card, I'm looking at Matt Sells and Dubravka as a combination. When we take a look at Matt Sells, these are his stats from last season and he ranked really well in saves and clean sheets. Points per game was high, and this year's ownership is at 21%, just under. So his price at 5 million, I think he is the best 5 million goalkeeper out there because he doesn't take up a Chelsea slot. A lot of people are thinking of getting Sanchez in. I think if you want three outfield Chelsea players, then Sanchez isn't going to be a long-term option, whereas you're less likely to want three outfield Nottingham Forest players, and the fixtures from a defensive point of view look great. When we take a look at the chart here for goalkeeper performance from last season, we can see that Matt Sells ranks, like we said, really highly for clean sheets and saves made, which is the ideal combination because you want your clean sheets, but if they're able to make saves alongside it, they're going to get those extra points across the season, and they might be on a more of a chance for bonus points as well. So into defence and gone for quite big at the back here with two premiums. And watching Man City yesterday and Aït-Nouri, he is a really good option. And I think he was not quite in our teams before in Game Week 1 because we weren't sure of how many minutes he's going to get, whether he's going to play with Guardiola. And A, Guardiola is out at the moment. And then B, we've got him being quite reliable and looking really attacking anyway. And even when Guardiola is back, I think Aït-Nouri is likely to keep his place, and we don't even have a timetable on that anyway. So his stats at the moment are from just this season, and he did get a bonus point yesterday with no attacking returns, which is really, you know, good to see as well, because that's what you want from your defenders, because they're not always going to get attacking returns, but are they going to pick up bonus points here and there? So he did get 9 points yesterday. So he will have got his defensive contributions as well, which is always awesome. So when we take a look at the chart here for defenders, now these are all the defenders who scored more than 3 points per game last season, alongside their defensive contributions per start. So there were a ton more defenders, but it just made the chart look too busy. So I wanted to concise it down to, the relevant players, the players we're likely to pick. And this is per start. So some players here might have started fewer games, but they might have really good defensive contributions. So that's when you just need to take into account the context. So, for instance, Tyrone Mings, Michael Keane, they're the sort of players that when they do play, they get a lot of defensive contributions. But if they're not starting many games, are they worth it compared to some other players who, are maybe not getting quite 10 contributions, but at least they're on the pitch a bit more to have the chance to get those, if that makes sense. So these are three of the defenders I've selected. The 4 million defenders were in the championship last season, so they're not necessarily going to have the relevant data to cope with and compare with the Premier League. So here we can see Mark Cucurella, Matt Gahey, and Ryan Aït-Nouri, and they're doing quite well in points per game. So they don't look quite high on this chart, but like I said, that's because there's a ton of defenders who got less than 3 points per game last season. So if I was to put them all in comparison, they'd look a lot higher. But 2 points per game for a defender is essentially blanking. every game week, which I didn't want to show you. So when we look at the 4.5 million defenders, we can see that Matt Gahey's got quite a good ability to get defensive contributions. He's near to 10, but he's also getting those good points per game in relation to other players at his same price point. Mark Cucurella and Ryan Aït-Nouri, they're not getting big um, points per games when you look at a Gvardiol or a Gabriel at the top of the chart. But what they are getting is, well, Cucurella is getting good defensive contributions, and Ryan Aït-Nouri is in a different situation. So he's getting those points based on when he played for Wolves last season. So now he's playing for Man City. There's a chance that the clean sheets go up and his attacking returns also go up. And if he's already getting defensive contributions, then he's going to shoot up this chart this time next year. So, like I said, you've got to take a look at the individual situations of the players as well, because this is all based on last season's data. So let's take a look at the midfield. And I just want to take a second to talk about Reinders because he's not in any of the charts today because we don't have his Premier League data. And I think we just have to be a little bit aware of chasing points in FPL. So when we say like points chasing or chasing points, what we mean is a player has just performed really well. And you think, oh, I need to get them in. I'm going to miss out on a ton of points. And whilst they might continue to perform well, Reinders isn't going to get a goal and an assist every game week. He might do really well in the season, but I wouldn't get him in expecting him to get 10 points each week. There's also a chance that he's had a start, so he might get rested, whereas other players that were rested for Man City, like, your Marmoush or, your Foden who didn't play, is going to get their turn at some point. I do think he's a great option though, which is why he's in this team. And at 5.5 million, I can see him rising up in price. There is a chance that he is, the Cole Palmer from a couple of years ago, a player who is just amazing value. And I've got Marmoush in my own team, and I think I could quite easily just swap him to Reinders and save 3 million to invest elsewhere. And that is a cool option. I just think if you're chasing players from Man City, you could, have one like Marmoush who didn't start, swap to Reinders for the next game, and then Reinders is benched and Marmoush starts, and then you're sort of just treading water a little bit. So don't rush to get him in because he is an interesting pick. The same could be said for Jorginho Rutter as well. Started up front for Brighton yesterday. Think he is a really interesting pick at 6 million. The problem we have with the midfielders is that there's so many options. So it's not like the strikers where there's just a real lack of options and you still need to pick three. You can only get five midfielders in. So you do need to take into account so many factors. And after 1 week in the Premier League, some are going to have done well, some are going to have done poorly, but it doesn't mean that you've made bad picks. It just means that Ryan has got a goal and assist. He's not going to be playing Wolves every week. Someone like a Florian Wirtz didn't return, but could do next week. So you've just got to take it as it comes. So when we look at this chart here, it's the number of bonus points that midfielders got last season across to their goal contribution. So essentially, what we're going to look at here is how important were their goal contributions to getting them bonus points? Because some players will score quite a lot of goals, but if they just do it in a couple of games, they're going to get less bonus points. This might show that if a player had more goal contributions throughout the season, they're more likely to get bonus points. And that would also show that they're really important for their team's performance. They have a significant impact in the result. So when we take a look at here, we can see that these sorts of players are the players who not only had a lot of goal contributions, but also they had a significant amount of bonus points. Now, Mbumo and Matthias Cunha swapped teams, and they've also gone to Bruno Fernandes's team. So it remains to be seen, especially with Man United playing later today, how they sort of gel. If it looks great and they're all contributing, I think they remain good options. If they're kind of taking, each other's space and they're not quite gelling, then they kind of all get ruled out. So it's a bit of all or nothing here, and I don't know at this stage, without seeing them play, how you would separate them. Cole Palmer is an absolute, easy pick. I think he's the highest percentage owned in FPL, and I completely understand why. Now, again, a bit like the defenders, this chart just shows players who had 5 bonus points last season and 5 goal contributions, each, just to narrow it down a bit because there's just so many players, it'd just get really busy. So this section here is where you would look at the 7 million players. There's a cluster of players here. And again, you need your football knowledge, League knowledge, team situation knowledge of which ones are best, which fixtures are coming up, because a lot of these players, you can't really split them in this section. They've all got good goals and assists contributions last season. They haven't got the highest bonus points, so I wouldn't say that, I would say there's probably other players in their teams that they play for who are also contributing to the bonus point system. Now, you might also be asking, well, where's Mo Salah? Well, he's here. So this is the chart with Mo Salah in. So I didn't want to put it in previously because it would make it really hard to read. As you can see on the screen, he is head and shoulders above the rest in terms of goal contributions last season and bonus points. So is he going to replicate that form this season? Possibly not. I would expect a drop off, but the gap is so big. That's why he's in this wild card team. I think I would put him in above someone like a Haaland. I know Haaland scored 2 goals, but I do think it's hard for a striker to outperform that price bracket. It's a lot easier for a midfielder to outperform that price. Not that it's easy, but it's definitely easier for Salah than it is for Haaland, just because there's more routes to points. Salah also nearly got 10 defensive contributions this game on Friday night. I think he got 8 or 9. It was really close. So I know he needs 12, but I think he's got a chance of getting some defensive contributions as well. So up front, we're going with Watkins, Mateta, and Strand Larsen. It's probably no surprise to see Strand Larsen here, but I just want to talk about Watkins a little bit more in depth. So these are his stats from last year because he didn't score or assist yesterday, and there's not really much to show from. But this is his current ownership and his current price. So he is in a quarter of people's teams, and whilst that looks like a high ownership, I always think like, well, that means that there's 3 quarters of FPL teams that don't have him in. So I think it's something that we do need to be aware of when considering ownership and are players actually that high owned? And it's also, if there's also a difference between engaged managers. So as we get later in the season, a load of managers at the start of the season might have Watkins in, but if they stop playing FPL, that percentage still counts. So it's really about what percentage owned is he in the top 1 million managers or the top 100K managers or around your rank that you really want to be considering as we get later into the season. So when we take a look at the chart here, it's just like the midfielders. We've got bonus points versus goal contributions, and there are just less strikers sort of that you would want in your team. So it does kind of restrict us a little bit, which is why a lot of people went for Mark Gui from Sunderland at 4.5 million. Now he's not on this chart because we don't have any data for last season, but I would just be wary of getting him in and thinking that he's going to play because he might play eventually, but how many goals are you realistically expecting from a Sunderland striker? I think at best you're probably looking at 8. And so I think whilst he's maybe a good, enabler to enable you to get in other strikers that you want, when it comes to things like bench boosting or relying on him with injuries or suspensions, I would just be a little bit wary. So here we can see that Erling Haaland has dropped quite a bit compared to someone like a Mo Salah on the previous chart. We can see that Haaland is kind of just in amongst it for other options, which is why, again, I wouldn't necessarily think that he is great value. He's also level with players like Jean-Philippe Mateta and João Pedro and Raul Jimenez for bonus points, even though he got a lot more goal contributions. So that tells me that A, other players in Man City are contributing and allowing them to get bonus points. But also, Haaland probably scored more hat tricks. So it doesn't really matter if you score a hat trick or 2 goals or 1 goal. The maximum bonus points you can get in a game is 3. So Haaland is probably has that big point scoring potential where he can get a hat trick, but he's only going to get you 3 bonus points. Whereas someone like a Visser or an Ollie Watkins or a Chris Wood, say, when we look at this section here, these players are probably scoring 1 goal a game. But if their teams are winning 1-0, then that has a bigger impact in the result, and therefore they're going to get more bonus points. So I did think it was an interesting comparison just to look at. Now, this section here for the strikers is really interesting because it's a bit like the defenders. There's just a much of a muchness here. And again, it comes down to fixtures, form, your preference, whether you've got, let's say you want João Pedro, but you've also got Sanchez, Cucurella, and Palmer, or Caicedo. You can't fit Pedro into your team anymore. So all those different things come into account. But I do think that, you know, just having those options there really helps. And I think knowing that each of these players are pretty much the same price, they're all 6.5, 7 million, 7.5 million. Hopefully, it helps you with your team selection as well. Now, I would avoid Visser, Alexander Isak, or Jared Bowen. But I think if Visser does go to Newcastle, I think at 7.5 million, he becomes a really great option and an option that a lot of people can fit in to their teams for those price points. So overall, I think the team looks pretty good. The strengths is that there's a variety of teams and there is strength everywhere. So I think having a variety of teams this early into the season is important because we don't know which Premier League team is going to do worse than we think. Because there's going to be some, they don't all perform really well, or at least to be expected. Some of them are going to finish in the bottom half of the league this season. I also think having, when I say strength everywhere, in the sense that we've got a strong goalkeeper in this team, we've got 2 premium defenders, we've got some big hitters in midfield, and we've also got some consistent strikers. And price points also matter. So let's say Cole Palmer doesn't do well or he gets injured. You can swap into any midfielder because you've already got Mo Salah. And the same for Watkins. Unless you want a Haaland or an Isak, you can swap Watkins to Gyökeres or anyone underneath that price because you've already got him there. And if you're swapping Palmer to someone cheaper, you could upgrade Mateta or you could upgrade Strand Larson, or there's loads of different ways you can go with players at these price points. And likewise, you can drop a 6 million defender to a 4.5 and upgrade your midfield. So the weaknesses for me are, like we said earlier with the midfielders, are we chasing points here? You have to be really careful not to knee jerk and make rash decisions. I was looking at the most recent transferred players in, and there's a ton of FPL managers who have already made transfers before the game week has even finished. I would at least wait and see all of the fixtures first. But I think that has to be balanced out with price rises. It depends if you've not got any money in the bank and you want to upgrade 5 million midfielder to Reinders, say, and you don't want to get priced out if he goes up in price. I understand the urgency to make that move. I would just bear in mind that you can't make unlimited moves. Things that happen today that are the best thing, look like the next best thing in FPL, there might be another next best thing in FPL tomorrow. So I would just be aware of that. And likewise with this team, there's no Arsenal. So, again, we'll wait and see how Arsenal do. But I do think having some Arsenal players in this team eventually would be really beneficial. So that's the team. Let me know what you think. If you're still listening to the video at this point, thank you very much. Please do subscribe. Are there any changes you'd make to this team? If you've got any transfer questions, pop them in the comments as well. And go check out my latest videos. Playlist will be on the screen right now. So hopefully having a good game week, and I will see you in the next one.